Hello and welcome. My name is Zoe and I will be spending the next 40 minutes with you to explore low-level concerns in relation to the professional conduct of those working with children and young people. Now, the term low-level concern is mostly related to the safeguarding responsibilities of schools and colleges as set out in Keeping Children Safe in Education statutory guidance. However, I truly believe adopting a similar approach to low-level concerns in the early years will support us in embracing an open and positive culture around safeguarding that puts children first. So, in summary, today we will look at our current safeguarding responsibilities and the importance of building that effective safeguarding culture. I am going to address the confusion and difference between allegations, complaints, and concerns, and then we will explore a little bit deeper what a low level concern actually is. We are going to consider past serious case reviews, so we're going to be looking at Vanessa George and Jimmy Savile, so it might be wise to listen on headphones or away from children if you can. We will then think about how and why we should adopt low-level concerns into our safeguarding processes. Now, this webcast is designed to instigate reflection on practice, so please pause me. I won't take offence as we work through, just in case you want to make notes or look something up or discuss anything with colleagues. So I always like to start with our statutory requirements. That's what we must do in our duties to safeguard children and young people. So if we consider the safeguarding and welfare requirements of the EYFS, it states clearly that we must ensure adults who have contact with children are suitable. It then goes further by referring to the check-in of qualifications, training, and any other required checks for them to be able to fulfill their roles. However, it's so important to acknowledge that the safer recruitment processes, which are hopefully embedded within your practice, do not stop as soon as a new employee starts at your organisation. Safer recruitment processes should follow the employee throughout their career, ensuring they remain suitable throughout their employment with you. Now, this will be supported through an effective supervision process and the safeguarding culture of the setting, which I suggest could be enhanced by including low-level concerns within your safeguarding policies and procedures. Now, I've also highlighted on the slide our duty to maintain records and policies and procedures, and it should be abundantly clear to all your employees the processes in place to safeguard children, including ensuring the adults working with children are suitable. It is also a requirement that your policy states the action to be taken in the event of an allegation being made against a member of staff, which we are now going to look at briefly on the next slide. So working together to safeguard children is the statutory guidance for all organisations and agencies who have functions relating to children. And it's within this document that our responsibilities regarding the management of allegations are set out, clearly requiring us to distinguish between allegations, concerns and complaints. Now, each one of these terms is an expression of unease or dissatisfaction. However, they will differ in their nature and severity, therefore need to be acted upon proportionately. Let's have a look at how they may differ. So an allegation is really a formal accusation or claims of wrongdoing, misconduct, or abuse against an individual. A person may have behaved in a way that has harmed or may have harmed a child. It may be the adult has committed a criminal offence against a child or behaved in a way that may pose a risk of harm to children. Or they may have behaved in a way that indicates that they might not be suitable to work with children. Now, I am hoping you were all familiar with this description on the slide because this is taken from the local authority designated officers, often referred to as the LADO, who manage the allegations process as part of the Safeguarding and Quality Assurance Service. Managing allegations is a sensitive business and we need to act promptly and professionally, so the LADO are there to guide us through this process. If you want a refresher on the role of the LADO, if you visit the Worcestershire Safeguarding website, they have a section on LADO with a range of useful leaflets to explain the processes. Worcestershire County Council also run regular courses on managing allegations, and it is always advised that DSRs complete this or similar training, so they are familiar with the managing allegations process in Worcestershire. On this note, also make sure registered persons are trained in this, as if an allegation has been made against a manager or DSL, they also need to understand these processes. So whereas an allegation is a formal accusation, a complaint is a formal expression of dissatisfaction or criticism, usually about a specific issue, action or behaviour. Complaints therefore tend to be more specific and targeted than concerns and may involve a request for action or resolution. With this in mind, earlier settings are required to have a formal complaints process which should always be followed to allow transparency with complainants and allow us to investigate and resolve in a professional and effective manner. As part of this, all providers must investigate written complaints, notify the person who made the complaint of the outcome of the investigation within 28 days of having received that complaint, and make a record of complaints available to Ofsted, or if you are an agency childminder, to your relevant agency. Complaints will be looked at by inspectors on your next Ofsted inspection, so it's really good practice to review these and ensure procedures have been followed. And if you don't have any complaints, make sure that your complaints procedure is visible and easy to understand by all staff and families. And then we have concerns, which tend to be less formal and more an expression of worry or unease about a situation, behaviour or practice. And quite often it's that niggle you may have, but without having concrete evidence of wrongdoing to back this up. It's so important we take note of those niggles and hold them in mind. By addressing these, we can then hope to seek clarification, understanding or resolution. So let's look at some examples of how to differentiate between concerns, complaints and allegations, as these terms can be used interchangeably and we really need to have a good understanding of what we are actually dealing with. Now, you may want to pause the recording to think about how you would deal with the following scenarios. I would like for you to consider which one is a concern, which a complaint and which one is the allegation. I also want you to consider the language here. You will notice in all three scenarios we have used the term concern. But is it a concern or something else? Scenario 1. Okay, so this is a parent who is clearly dissatisfied with the communication from the key person. Therefore, this is a specific and targeted concern which I am predicting has been raised as they want action to be taken to resolve this. I would therefore, as a leader, classify this as a complaint and follow my normal complaint procedures. Scenario 2. This second scenario is more serious. A room leader has been witnessed to have allegedly ridiculed a child and failed to meet their emotional needs. This is an allegation as it is a formal accusation of wrongdoing, and I would suggest misconduct. In this instance, as you are treating this as an allegation, you would refer to the harms threshold of the LUDO. You would need to consider, has the alleged perpetrator behaved in a way that has harmed the child, possibly committed a criminal offence against them, behaved towards the child that indicates they may pose a risk of harm to children, or behaved in a way that indicates they may not be suitable to work with children. Now, if this was a one-off incident, this may not meet threshold, and although an allegation, this should be dealt with through your performance or disciplinary procedures. However, if you are unsure, it is always best to speak with the LADO for advice. There's also a national LADO threshold document, which is actually designed to support LADO in their decisions, so it's a really interesting read. Just Google LADO threshold document. And of course, if you feel this does meet threshold, then you would contact LADO to receive further guidance. Okay, scenario 3. So by deduction, scenario 3 must be a concern. The practitioner who has reported this is worried about this change in behaviour, which is out of character. And I'm guessing the practitioner may be worried both for her fellow colleague and how this is impacting the quality of care, yet has no specifics to go on. It's simply an observation that their colleague is struggling at lunchtime. Now, as a leader, I'm sure you would speak with the colleague to ask if everything is okay. In this scenario, which is actually a real one, the colleague reported feeling exhausted and irritable at this time of day, and on further discussion it was advised they saw their GP as there were other symptoms which were new to the colleague. As a result, the colleague was diagnosed as a diabetic, and their change in mood and other symptoms that were not noticeable down to low blood sugar. Now, of course, this type of scenario, there may not always be a simple explanation, which is why having a procedure for dealing with low-level concerns can be really beneficial. Now, the introduction of low-level concerns came about back in 2021 when a requirement was placed on all schools and colleges in England to have a mechanism in place to share, record and respond to concerns or allegations about adults working with children that do not meet the harm threshold, known as low-level concerns. Although this requirement detailed in keeping children safe in education is specifically applicable to schools and colleges in England, it does clearly state as a matter of best practice it could be applied to any organisation working with children, hence this webcast. So what exactly is a low-level concern? Well, keeping children safe in education define this as any concern, no matter how small, that an adult working in or on behalf of the school or college may have acted in a way in which their behaviour does not meet the professional standards required by that organisation, such as being inconsistent with the staff code of conduct, including inappropriate conduct outside of work, and does not meet the harm threshold or is otherwise not serious enough to consider a referral to the LADO. Now, if we are to adopt low-level concerns as part of our safeguarding processes in the early years, then it is vital that we have the frameworks to do this. And by this, I mean robust policies and procedures addressing issues such as confidentiality, IT usage, the use of mobile phones, lone working, intimate care, and suitable persons, to name a few. In addition, a staff code of conduct which reflects the behaviours you want to see within your organisation and those behaviours which are not acceptable. To support this, clear and effective employee contracts detailing what constitutes gross misconduct and the procedures around this. You may also want to ensure you have a capability procedure which will support you in supporting your employees should their performance not be at the required levels. With these frameworks in place, we are in a better place to enhance our safeguarding processes by including low-level concerns within our safeguarding policies. So why should we include low-level concerns in our safeguarding practice? Well, in researching for this webcast, I have come across the work of Marcus Aruga, who is an independent safeguarding consultant who for many years has been advocating for organisations to look beyond safeguarding boundaries, highlighting the need for us to be alert to the signs abusers will no doubt exhibit in the prequel to abuse. Now, this reminded me of the work of David Finkelor, who in the 1980s created a descriptive model called the 4 preconditions model. This model suggested there are 4 preconditions that need to be met in order for child sexual abuse to occur. Firstly, the motivation and interest to sexually abuse a child. Secondly, the overcoming of internal barriers, otherwise known as the conscience. Thirdly, the overcoming of external barriers, where the perpetrator creates opportunity to abuse. And then finally, the ability to overcome any resistance or reluctance from the victim, often referred to as grooming. Now, as disturbing as this is to think about, if sexual abusers do go through this process, then this means there are opportunities to prevent abuse happening, as demonstrated hopefully on the visual on the slide. So if we think of the motivation stage, there isn't much we can do about someone's internal motivation. However, we can stop people with questionable motivations infiltrating our settings through safer recruitment processes, which really delve deeply into the values and beliefs of potential employees. We need to understand their true motivations for wanting to work with children, young people and families. And it's important to say here that having the motivation to sexually abuse does not necessarily mean they will offend, but this does set them on that trajectory. If we then move on to the conscience stage, this is a key time where low-level concerns may arise. Potential abusers may have a sexual interest in children but know this is wrong, so consciously or subconsciously they will start to change the narrative, trying to justify their thoughts. A potential sexual abuser will be seeking validation for these thoughts. They may talk with colleagues about pornography or use disrespectful language or sexualize others. A case that really sticks in my mind regarding this is that of Wayne Couzens, who was convicted of the rape and murder of Sarah Everard in 2021. Couzens was a Metropolitan Police officer with history of indecent exposure, sexual assault and attempted kidnapping. However, the most chilling part of this for me was the fact he was nicknamed in the force as the rapist. This is why it's so important staff feel safe to call out inappropriate behaviours and have processes in place for them to be able to do so. So when a potential sexual abuser has justified why they can abuse, they will seek out opportunities to do so. This is where manipulation comes into play, using their position of trust to create a trusting relationship with colleagues, families and victims. And a case studied by Marcus Aruga was that of William Vahi, who was a popular and respected teacher at Southbank International School in Westminster, London. Now, he was accused of abusing up to 54 male adolescents between 2009 to to 2013, but was never convicted as he actually committed suicide before an arrest was made. Now, Vahi had a 40-year career across 9 international schools around the world and was known for his charisma, unconventional teaching styles, and difficult to manage behaviour, which allowed boundaries to be blurred. He created a school travel club, which included residential trips, which gave him access to children. It is alleged he would drug pupils and then insist on caring for them in his accommodation, giving him the opportunity to abuse without their knowledge. Vahi overstepped boundaries and got away with it down to his charisma and position within the organisation. So we must remember to think the unthinkable. Anyone can abuse. There is no profile. But what we do know is they need opportunity. If we take away those opportunities, then abuse cannot happen. The final precondition is the abuse. This is where we need to have robust safeguarding policies and procedures, which include how to deal with disclosures. We need to really know the children in our care so we will know when something is wrong. We need to listen to what children are telling us, both verbally and through behaviours. By creating a strong safeguarding culture adopted by everyone in an organisation, we have opportunities to stop potential abusers infiltrating our settings. I love this quote by Marcus Aruga. Consciously or otherwise, the organisation defines its culture, and that culture forms the context within which the organisation's people judge the appropriateness of their behaviour. Now, I don't feel we can talk about this subject without talking about Jimmy Savile, who created many opportunities to abuse both children and adults over a long period of time, both at the BBC and across many NHS hospital settings. Now, I'm of an age where I remember Jimmy Savile, but for those of you who are younger, Savile started his career in the BBC, and then over time, mainly due to his charity work, he became a national icon with close links to government and royalty. Jimmy Savile literally hid in plain sight, using his charity work and celebrity status as a cover to allow him access to children, young people and grown adults. If you watch back over the old TV coverage of Savile, you can see how his larger-than-life personality seemed to give him the freedom to go unchallenged for his unconventional and inappropriate behaviours. Jimmy Savile died in 2011, and it was then that allegations began to emerge about his abuse across 3 main settings: Leeds General, Stoke Mandeville and Broadmoor hospitals, where Savile volunteered. However, Lampard and Marsden's investigation into Savile highlights a further 28 hospital settings involved in this investigation. Savile infiltrated these 3 main hospitals through volunteering in different guises, from helping with hospital radio, portering or helping put on entertainments. He became a regular presence at all 3 hospitals and was involved with Leeds General Infirmary for over 50 years, where he was a significant fundraiser. As part of the police investigation Operation U-Tree, 130 people came forward with accounts of abuse and inappropriate behaviour, his victims ranging from 5 years old to 75 years old, and that included both patients, visitors and staff. Now, if you haven't already seen it, I would recommend you watch the drama The Reckoning, which, as shocking as it is, demonstrates how he used his position of trust to abuse people over many years, often in the presence of other patients or staff members. His public profile as a charitable fundraiser allowed him to ignore safeguarding policy and prevented intervention from higher powers, despite rumours of him being a sexual predator. It seems in this case the nature of the alleged behaviours were in such huge contrast to that public persona that people started to rationalise his actions, as how can someone who does so much good be so bad? So it therefore comes back to having systems in place allowing us to be curious and constructively challenge inappropriate behaviours, which again is where low-level concerns can help us. Interestingly, Richard Mortley, in the Secretary of State for Health Investigation, comments that not much can be learned by Savile's motivations, and I imagine that's due to the complexity of his personality. However, he states he did this because he could. He saw opportunity and took it, as in Finkler's precondition model. Therefore, we need systems in place which support us in being able to call out when something just doesn't feel right and trust those gut feelings that are ultimately there to protect us. Although low-level concerns are a way of identifying inappropriate behaviours of our employees, adopting low-level concerns into our safeguarding processes can also protect staff when abuse may be accidental or allow us as leaders to re-educate where abuse may be neglectful. And I'm really hoping this diagram depicts this visually. If we take emotional abuse as an example, accidental emotional abuse could occur from forgetting information. And the Father's Day card example is a scenario which I'm sure we have all experienced at one time or another. This is an oversight which I am sure you would kick yourself for, but there is no intent there to do harm. Neglectful emotional abuse is a little more concerning. These examples suggesting that the emotional needs of children are not met, the child clearly not at the core of what you do. Now, this would raise concerns on suitability and could be addressed through supervision and revisiting the professional codes of conduct. We then, of course, have deliberate, where there is an intent to cause harm to the child. Now, if we think back to the scenario of the practitioner labelling the child whiny Wendy, dependent on the context, this sits between neglectful and deliberate. As a leader, your role is to make a judgment as to whether this is a disciplinary matter, a capability matter, or a LADO referral. As with all safeguarding, the more pieces you have to your puzzle, the better chance you have of making that correct judgment. So the previous slide was focused on emotional abuse, but other types of abuse can also be accidental, neglectful, or deliberate. And this is why self-reporting low-level concerns should be a key part of your safeguarding practices. It should be seen as a positive action, as it can enable adults to get support with potentially difficult issues. It may be an adult finds himself in a situation which could be misinterpreted or may appear compromising to others, or after reflection they may feel their behaviour has fallen below the standards expected. Working with older children, examples could be a practitioner accidentally swearing or walking into the toilets whilst a child is undressing, or sharing a playlist which plays inappropriate music. Having the opportunity to self-report in a safe space heightens awareness of the expected behavioural standards whilst contributing to a safeguarding culture where everyone is committed to meeting the expected professional standards. It really raises the bar. Now, if we consider early years children, have you ever had a child tell you that you've hurt them as you help them with something, maybe a nappy change or even trip over them? Encourage your staff to self-report. And what about those situations which we may be able to preempt that may give cause for concern if seen out of context, such as transporting a child home as the adult is friend with the parent? Babysitting is another complex situation where families trust the staff, so ask them to babysit on weekends. I'm not going to tell you what's right or wrong here, but you must think very carefully about the implications to your staff and setting should anything go wrong. An allegation could be made against a staff member or parent, which could cause you all kinds of complications. If you can preempt situations such as a family needing help with transport or emergency babysitting, encourage your teams to self-report, especially if this goes against your normal procedures. This will help to safeguard individuals and contributes to the openness and transparency in the culture of your organisation. The Vanessa George Serious Case Review is the perfect example to demonstrate the importance of acknowledging, reporting and dealing with low-level concerns, and this could have potentially prevented the tragic events that occurred at Little Ted's nursery in Plymouth in 2009. Let's revisit our visual and work through the 4 preconditions model. Let's look at the first stage, motivation. Now, the Serious Case Review unveiled significant failings of the setting in the fact there was no safer recruitment procedures in place. George had been recruited via word of mouth through the primary school where the manager knew her in her school governor capacity. There are no records of an advertisement, formal interview or references for George's post, although there was a cleared CRB check. Now, we will never know if George's true feelings towards children may have been spotted through safer recruitment procedures, but had the setting set out their responsibilities to safeguard children from the very beginning through robust recruitment processes, standards and expectations would have been set. We must be mindful that safer recruitment is not just about the pre-employment checks, it's that ongoing scrutiny of the person's character and motivations throughout their career. George's behaviour was reported as changing in 2008. Had this been addressed, there may have been a different outcome. Okay, conscience. Within the nursery, George was generally described as a popular member of staff. The nursery manager did tell the review that George had changed from approximately December 2008. She's described as from that point always seeming to be on the internet and chasing men. George's behaviour became more and more unprofessional, sharing adult pornography with members of staff and boasting about her sexual exploits and extramarital affairs. A review found the safeguarding culture of the nursery is non-existent and explicit sexual references in conversations were the norm. It was clear that George's larger-than-life character cemented her as a key member of staff deemed difficult to challenge. Okay, in regard to opportunity, there were countless failings by the setting. Firstly, staff who had concerns did not share these effectively due to a number of reasons. Lack of safeguarding training and understanding of responsibilities. In the review, it was actually found that Georgie's conduct and sexualised behaviour in the nursery was not noted as a clear sign that they may have a sexual predator in their midst. There were no systems in place to report concerns and no supervision process, although I must say supervision was not a requirement at that time. There was no whistleblowing policy or understanding of how to raise concerns. Professional boundaries did not exist, exacerbated by friendships within the setting. Now, staff did experience feelings of guilt as they had been exposed to inappropriate material shared by George, but challenge was difficult as they had been made to feel implicit in this behaviour. She was changing that narrative. The setting was committee run, but there was no leadership from the trustees. One trustee was actually dead, and there was real confusion as to who actually was a trustee and what their responsibilities were as the registered person. In addition, basic policies and procedures were not in place to support the safeguarding of children, such as rules around the use of mobile phones, nappy changing and intimate care. There was no key person system in place, allowing George to use her position of power to operate without challenge. Little Ted's, in effect, was the perfect place in which to abuse due to the lack of oversight and leadership of the setting. Now, because George had the motivation, justified her thoughts and found opportunity, she was able to abuse. It was in 2008 that George began an online relationship with Colin Blanchard, who coached George to abuse babies and toddlers for his own gratification. George began to find time alone with the children at Little Ted, sometimes when she changed their nappies. She sexually assaulted them and used the camera on her mobile phone to record the abuse. She would then share these images amongst a group of other abusers as part of a paedophile ring. It was feared at one point that up to 300 children had been abused, and this was narrowed down to 30 by police, and she admitted to making and sharing 124 images of children. So I'm really hoping, after reviewing Vanessa George, looking into Jimmy Savile and William Vahi, that you understand the importance of building a robust and embedded safeguarding culture in your settings. However, it's also important to acknowledge this is our safeguarding duty, and as earlier settings, we need to provide an open and positive culture around safeguarding that puts children's interests first. These requirements are specified in the Early Years Inspection Handbook, so just take a few minutes to read through these and reflect on how you deliver on this. When we think about the safeguarding culture of our organisations, I think we really need to think about this in two parts. Firstly, what does my safeguarding look like externally, and would it deter perpetrators trying to infiltrate my setting? And then look internally with a critical eye. Are my current processes robust enough to identify concerns and to stop the abuse of children, young people or adults? Now, if we consider our external profiles first, and this actually might be a great team exercise to do, spending some time thinking about what messages are we consciously and unconsciously sending to people outside of our organisation. Be critical and consider, is our commitment to safeguarding children clear on our website and social media? If you are advertising for positions, employed or voluntary, are you following safer recruitment processes, informing potential candidates at each stage of the process your commitment to safeguarding? Now, we are all aware of the recruitment crisis the early years sector currently finds itself in, and yes, we may resort to social media to widen our search of potential employees. However, make sure this meets safer recruitment guidelines. What about social media and your current staff? Are their accounts private? And even if they are, how would you deal with an inappropriate post which raises the question of their suitability to work with children? Behaviours outside of work will be scrutinised, and in the case of Vanessa George, she was allegedly groomed by Blanchard as she had access to children. He must have had a good idea that she would cooperate with this. There must have been signals that she gave. So consider, if one of your employees looks vulnerable online, there is the possibility of them being targeted. And of course, staff behaviour outside of work will rightly or wrongly give a sense of the kind of people that work at your setting and maybe show weaknesses that could be taken advantage of. Public profile can also be formed as you go out and about with the children. What does this look like to an outsider? Does your setting give a feeling of one who takes safeguarding seriously? Perpetrators will look for weaknesses such as a change in leadership team or an overstretched setting who are desperate for staff. They will find these weaknesses and exploit them. So when thinking about the external view of our safeguarding culture, we need to look iron proof. Now, you may have heard of the case of Paul Wilson, who in 2011 was jailed for life for raping a 2-year-old child at Little Stars Nursery in Birmingham. Now, I'm not going to go into details of this case, but what I did want to bring to your attention was in the serious case review, it states Wilson had failed to abuse in a school where he was on student placement because of the clear rules in place. He found the weakness. We then have our internal processes which feed into our safeguarding culture. So again, take some time to reflect. Do we have an effective code of conduct? And is this revisited annually with all staff and volunteers, no matter what level they are? And as with all policies, is this understood and adhered to? Having a code of conduct is not enough. It needs to be referred to regularly and updated in line with societal changes. Facebook wasn't a thing 20 years ago, so we need to keep abreast of changes and address these within our code of conduct. Now, if you would like some guidance on creating a code of conduct, the NSPCC has some information that you may find useful. We also need to think about your induction processes. Is this a tick in the box exercise, or do you really prioritise time with the employee to understand their motivations better for working with children? And are you using this time to reiterate your joint responsibilities to safeguard children? Is supervision effective in addressing concerns of both conduct and performance? Now, I used to reflect very deeply on this subject as, to be honest, there were times I wasn't happy with my supervision process. I would explore, are employees telling me what I want to hear or what they truly think? Supervision is so important to get right and can really help you to understand your individual team members better, exploring their experiences of childhood and their current thoughts on this in a safe space. And finally, we have role modelling. And from experience, being a manager in early years can be really lonely, as we have to maintain those professional boundaries and set the example of what we want to see. And yes, it can be frustrating on that night out when you want to let your hair down, but I really believe this sacrifice supports the overall safeguarding culture you are trying to demonstrate. And when we get this right, our staff feel safe and secure to call out something when it is wrong. Now, I'm really hoping that after watching this webcast, you may be considering adopting a low-level concern section within your safeguarding and child protection policies. Farah and Co have devised a great document on this very subject. It's very in-depth, considers serious case reviews and examples of low-level concern. So if this webcast has ignited interest in this subject, then this is a must-read. In summary, though, these are the points you need to consider in your policy. An explanation of what you do with concerns that don't meet that threshold, and examples of what a low-level concern might look like. Your commitment to creating a strong safeguarding culture. So this is where you distinguish between that expected and appropriate behaviour from inappropriate, problematic or concerning behaviour in themselves or others. And this will refer to your staff code of conduct. So for the addition to your policy to be effective, you really need to ensure you have an effective and current staff code of conduct. The importance of sharing low-level concerns as a positive action. Staff need to trust that you will handle anything shared in a sensitive and proportionate way. We need to reassure that such concerns, when raised, will be handled promptly and effectively, whilst on the other hand, protecting staff from any potential false, low-level concerns or misunderstandings. How to report. This needs to be clear, including what to do if you would normally report to is the person you have raised the concerns about. There needs to be options here. We also need to state here the commitment the setting has to share information with other senior leaders, so isolated incidents aren't being dealt with by different people. We need to join the dots. Self-reporting, it's important to mention as this raises the awareness that things do happen, and we need our teams to feel confident to recognise, acknowledge and learn from this. This is a positive thing to do and strengthens the safeguarding culture of the setting. We then need to state how we will respond to low-level concerns. And yes, we need to state what may happen if concerns do meet threshold, but additionally, how we will support if they don't. We need to demonstrate here that when a concern is raised, it is handled robustly, proportionately and sensitively. And this shows employees our commitment to them and to the children and families in our care. It's important to state how you will record low-level concerns using your professional judgment as to what information is necessary for safeguarding purposes and how this will be kept under GDPR regulations. And demonstrating our commitment to review low-level concerns is so important, as this shows our employees that we take ownership of the safeguarding culture of the setting and want to avoid atmospheres of suspicion or toxicity. There are grey areas when it comes to low-level concerns, and so we want to learn in conjunction with our team. We need buy-in and trust from our employees. Then finally, we need to state how you will share information in regard to providing references for those that may have low-level concerns recorded on their file. So as we've reached the end of the webcast, I thought it would be really great to end with a scenario. So I'm going to read this out, and then I'd like you to take 5 minutes to pause the webcast and think about this situation and what you might do with this. So the scenario is you've got a staff member working in the baby room. On Mondays, they're frequently late, and that's often when they're on an early shift, and they come in dishevelled, dirty uniform, hair not brushed, and old makeup. Their behaviour is reported as being a little erratic. Some days they can lack motivation, other days they might be snappy with babies and colleagues. And often by Thursday, though, they're back in the game, nurturing, warm, sense of humour, and a good team member. Okay, so I hope you've had time to think about that. So I'm going to share you my thoughts. And again, with these things, there's always a bit more context. So they're quite hard to do scenarios because you'll probably be asking me lots more questions. But from the basics that we've got, my thoughts here are the staff member has not directly behaved in a way that has harmed a child or posed a risk to the child. So this would not meet LADO threshold. However, this is not to say it wouldn't later down the line if issues were not addressed. So we just can't ignore this. And with all things, we have to take things in context. What does snappy mean? It would be really good to get some clarification on what this actually looks like. But on the face of it, this looks to me like a low-level concern, as it does not meet LADO threshold and is actually inconsistent with the staff code of conduct. So a meeting with the member of staff should be arranged to address concerns and try and understand what is going on for them at this time. And I would also be revisiting the code of conduct with them to remind and clarify those expectations of the setting. Now, from the scenario, the staff member obviously has potential, as on Thursday they are fully functioning. However, this needs to be consistent on every day. From your discussions, you may discover that the staff member is a carer at home, so has limited time in the mornings, or it may be they like to get out of the house due to dysfunctional relationships in the family home and so tend to sofa surf through the week. Or it may be they just like going out and their behaviours come from an active social life. We need to be detectives to be able to then support them in fulfilling their roles and responsibilities within your setting. And this is where it sometimes gets complicated as we juggle staff well-being and performance. However, this should not reduce our authority in setting and maintaining standards. Once you do have a good understanding of what is going on, you can put a plan in place to both support and monitor, and make sure this is documented and reviewed regularly. For this situation, I would not be waiting for supervision. I would have more frequent meetings until you are reassured professional conduct is consistent. And of course, if snappy behaviour does turn out to put a child at risk of harm, a LADO referral would be required. Okay, so it's clear to deal with low-level concerns effectively, we do need those frameworks to support us. So my first step in introducing low-level concerns into my safeguarding practice would be to revisit the code of conduct and ensure policies are clear on expectations of the setting and how you support employees in meeting these. I would then think about how I educate my team as to the importance of low-level concerns, so this is seen as a positive addition to safeguarding practice and not a tool to raise suspicion or create an untrusting working environment. Now, to help with this, there are some great webinars and podcasts on this as shown on the slide, or you may also want to share this webcast with them. The guidance for safer working practice is also great to share, as it states what employees and settings should do in regard to their professional conduct with and around children. What we must hold in mind is nobody should be able to bypass policies and procedures. And so if we have clear values which are embedded within our organisations, monitored and reinforced, we are moving towards an effective safeguarding culture. And there we have it. That's it from me. So, as always, please contact the team if you have any questions about this webcast or actually anything early years at all. We're always here to help you and to support. So, please do get in touch. Thank you very much for listening.